What's going on, guys? It's me, Physics, for like the 80th time today. First off, I just want to say thanks a bunch for 2K subs. We completely smashed through that very quickly, so thanks a bunch for that. This is going to be the Sunder League starter video that actually goes over gear and all that other stuff. I do want to reiterate for 1 second, the last video was just me talking about Sunder mechanics, okay? That's not a guide. I very rarely do actual guides. Most of my stuff is build diaries and like topical lectures and stuff. Okay, my build diaries are just me like documenting my progression and then answering questions for people who want to follow along. I've only ever released 2 guides, one for Earthshatter and one for EK Nova. So I'm very particular about what I call a guide and what I do not call a guide. And this is not a guide. Now I will try to go over some leveling tips and stuff like that. And I'll go through like a leveling tree with you guys, but this is not what I would consider personally a guide. If anything, it's just a tool to help you guys who want to try following along. And friendly reminder that also I do build diary updates of the builds I play. If you're new to the channel, on Leaguestart there will be a day 1, a day 2, and then like a day 3, and then it will start to taper off and do like boss showcases and stuff like that. But then you'll be able to see how I am actually progressing with my gear and with my character from day to day. Through each play session, okay? So just to get that out of the way. All right, so for starting off, I left myself some notes over here. So for starting off, I'll go through the leveling tree. So the way that you're gonna wanna start for leveling, and I did go over this a little bit in the previous video, but you're gonna wanna path through the melee nodes here. And here's the thing. For leveling, there's 2 different ways you can do this, okay? I did a lot of leveling runs to try to simulate this and test this. Act 1 is just going to be Pain Champ. Marauder Act 1 sucks. It's the worst in the game by far. You're just going to have to accept that and get past it, okay? My lowest Act 1 time that I was able to get was like 25.5 minutes. If you guys are curious like where that is relative to, Havoc's Sunder run, I think he did like a 23.5, 24 minute Act 1. And he's like a literal probably like top 5 speedrunner of the game. So for like casual players or whatever, it's gonna be like a long Act 1 probably. That's probably a safe assumption to make, because I did a lot of Act 1 runs testing this, like a lot of them. I did like Act 1, Act 3s, and like 2 Act 5s, and it's just gonna suck. Okay, so just get ready for that. Like Duelist Act 1 is like one of the best in the game, if not the best in the game, and it's a total breeze. Marauder is the inverse of that. It's just pain. Okay, it's depression. Act 1 Marauder is depression. So just accept that, and I'm gonna answer like a few like tips or like caveats here that are gonna apply depending on what situation you find yourself in, right? Because a lot of Act 1 depends on what you actually drop and what Tarkly offers you in the vendor window, right? So starting off here, you're gonna want to go through all the melee damage nodes up here and grab Born to Fight. So you can either level as Ground Slam, right? You can just straight Ground Slam out of the gate, or you can mule Splitting Steel from a duelist. So which one of these 2 you decide to do is completely up to you. So Splitting Steel is going to feel really good, and then by the time you get to like Upper Prison with Brutus, the damage is going to fall off really hard because these Fizz nodes do not apply to Splitting Steel. However, these nodes will give damage to Splitting Steel. So there's a very important distinction in wording here that you guys need to pay attention to. This is increased melee physical damage. Splitting Steel, none of the steel skills are melee, right? However, these nodes are increased physical damage with melee weapons. Now, even though those skills are not melee, you are using a melee weapon. So things like Butchery will give damage to Splitting Steel. Things like melee damage and stuff won't. So if you want to, while leveling, if you decide to go with the steel skills, you can go through the bottom here. Just be aware that when you swap to Sunder, you will be dealing considerably less damage than if you path through the top. That's a decision for you to make. I path through the top damage nodes. I think I'm just gonna end up going with Ground Slam because I'm lazy, and the times that I got between the 2 were very similar anyway. So it depends if you want to have like an easier time with the latter half of Act 1, or if you want to have an easier time for the beginning half of Act 1. Like if you're someone who consistently dies to Roas or something like that, you're probably going to want to mule Splitting Steel because it'll be a lot safer for mud flats, right? Anyway, so I path through the top here, grab Born to Fight. And then this is where you have to do your first check, right? So once you get to Born to Fight, when you go to town, when you're submerged depths, right? Submerged passive, whatever it is. You're gonna go to town, and at this point, do you have a transmute orb, right? That's the first thing you gotta ask yourself. Because if you do, you want to check Nessa. Does Nessa have a int amulet? I can't remember the name of it right now. The blue int amulet that just gives you 30 int. If she has one of those, buy it, and that will save you from having to pick up versatility right now. If she doesn't have it, then you're going to want to path versatility first, because this is what is going to allow you to use a movement skill on Marauder, okay? You need that dex in. Now, obviously, if you get lucky here and you happen to pick up a magic or a rare item that has like dex or int on it, this rule doesn't apply to you, okay? But for everyone else, if you can get an early int amulet, definitely buy it. It's worth the transmute. If you can't, just path versatility first. Once you grab versatility, you're going to path Heart of Warrior, 2 nodes here. If you feel lacking in damage, you can grab Butchery first. Otherwise, grab Heart of the Warrior. A lot of this is, like I said, it depends on the items you're getting. If you have like some decent items, that's what you're going to want to do, okay? So afterwards, you're going to path up through Butchery, all the way over here, through to here, right? Once you've pathed up through here, you're going to path up into Resolute Technique, right? And then after that, you have some decisions to make. I did one leveling run where I actually rushed Hardy, because it would completely counteract the degen from Blood Rage in Act 2. It was pretty comfy, but damage was a little bit lower, you know, towards the beginning. This will depend on if you get a good weapon. If you get a good weapon early on, it's probably worth taking Hardy. If you don't, then just ignore it. It's not that big of a deal. Afterwards, I actually rushed Slaughter, because it gives you a ton of attack speed, which will give you way better leap slams early on. And then Axe Mastery, you actually want to take Onslaught effect here, not Rage on hit. So you'll take the Onslaught effect here, because you will be using Onslaught in your links, and then path down, and then you can grab life as you go. The masteries early on are very strong. You're going to want to grab the plus 50 to max life node. And then, yeah, if you decide to grab the life mastery up by Hardy, I would take 2% life regen while moving. This will give you a lot of life regen early on, which will help a lot. And moving down, you don't need to grab Call to Arms or anything early. What I actually did while leveling most of the time is I would go through here. If I felt like I needed life, again, this depends on your gear. If you have a lot of life rolls on your gear, then you don't need to worry about grabbing Bloodless. But if you feel like you're on low life, like I would say about 700-ish HP by the time you're entering Act 3. If you have less than that, you're going to want to grab some of these life nodes that I'm pointing out. If you have more than that, if you have a lot of life on your gear, then you're probably good for a while. At least that's for how I feel comfortable playing hardcore, right? So you're going to want to path through down here, and I actually just rush Hatchet Master, because as soon as you get Hatchet Master, one, it's got a ton of attack speed, which is going to let you zoom, because at this point, you're probably going to be life tapping your Leap Slam, and it gives you a second Axe Mastery, which will let you get Rage on hit, which is going to make you zoom more and give you damage. But most importantly, it's going to give you Onslaught on kills. 20% to gain Onslaught on kill is, one, really OP, and two, this frees you up a slot. So this is actually going to be a ton of damage, more damage than you're going to get anywhere else on the tree. It's definitely worth rushing. And I like going through bottom side. You could technically path your tree through the top side if you wanted to. So that's like a quick TLDR. After you grab this, you're going to want to go up here and grab your reservation nodes, your determination, aura mastery, and stuff like this. Around this point, you're going to be like towards Act 5 or so, the end of Act 4, Act 5. This is when you're gonna want to stop running your Herald of Purity and use determination instead. I will make like a little leveling tree in here for you guys for at least the early game. But I just wanted to walk this through in the video. I'll make like a short little leveling tree before I put out the POV. After that, for leveling gear, so early on, if you guys care about like speed strats, early on what you're going to want to do is actually dual wield for ground. Okay, this is if you're going ground slam. It's going to be a little bit harder to dual wield if you're going for steel skills, because I'll just explain it. I'll explain it. So basically you want to dual wield early on. Because when you're dual wielding, you get a 15% more multiplier to your attack speed and a 15% chance to block. So it's going to be good defensively, and that attack speed really helps early on. You start with the club, you mule over splitting steel, you will have one sword. but a lot of this comes down to what you drop off of Hillock. You're going to want to dual wield for the first few levels, basically until you get over into Born to Fight and start taking Butchery, because these nodes are for two-handers. So as soon as you're in Butchery, you're going to want to stop dual wielding. So this is like literally only for the first 5 levels if you care about being optimal for that. After that, you'll swap out and you'll be two-handers the rest of your life, literally. So just to explain. And then for the steel skills, you need to be using axes or swords. You can't use maces. And Marauder starts with the mace. Duelist starts with a rusted sword, I believe. So yeah, you just, again, this depends on if you decide to go splitting or ground slam. Like I said, I tested them both quite a bit. My times were pretty similar because splitting steel saves so much time early on compared to ground slam. And ground slam just feels a lot better the latter half of the axe. What is going to be the determining factor in how long your act 1 takes is how lucky or unlucky you get with a 3-link to be able to run Onslaught as soon as possible, and how lucky or unlucky you get with getting your movement skill up and operational as soon as possible. So yeah, you know, and then movement speed boots. So a few little tips here. First thing you're going to want to do, if you don't know, general leveling tips, is you're going to want to run up to Tarkly as soon as you kill Hillock. And you're going to want to see if he's selling any move speed boots. If he's not, then go on, and every time you come back to town until you drop some, you want to check for move speed boots, because that's going to increase your time a lot. Also worth noting, and again, if you're following this in hardcore and you're not comfortable with this, that's fine. But if you care about going faster, this will save you a little bit of time. Early on, you do not want to be running a chess piece, because chess pieces have an inherent 3% reduced move speed modifier on them. It's a hidden stat, but it is on there. So if you're using a chess piece, you will be moving slower than if you weren't. Again, but if you're following this in hardcore and you want the defensive stats, absolutely go for that. But if you're playing softcore and you don't care about dying, or potentially dying, right? Like if you don't care about the defensive stats, or if you're comfortable and you're confident that you won't die due to not having a chess piece, then definitely don't use one, because it will slow you down. However, if I got a chess piece that was red, red, green, regardless of when it was, and it allowed me to run Onslaught and Chance to Bleed ASAP, that's what I'd be doing. For splitting steel, your links are going to be splitting steel, Onslaught, and Chance to Bleed, which is green, green, red. That's what you want to look for from vendors on any slot. And then if you're going ground slam, it's just add a red socket instead of a green. You want red, red, green. One for ground slam, one for Chance to Bleed, and one for Onslaught. That's going to be your 3-link, okay? Once you get to Act 2, you will replace Chance to Bleed with Melee Fizz on ground slam, which is now Sunder, but you'll replace it with Melee Fizz. And then for your green socket, once you pick up Hatchet Master, you'll replace it with Close Combat. Now, once you're in Act 2, if you get a red, green, green, or if you have saved a red, green, green from Act 1, or you were using Splitting Steel, right, then that is optimal, honestly, because red, green, green lets you use Onslaught and Close Combat and Sunder, and Close Combat is like the best support by far because it doesn't have a less attack speed multiplier attached to it. So that's optimal, right? So moving on from there, I think that's everything. In terms of gear, you just want to upgrade axe bases as you go through. So let's pull up a list here. So these are 2-hand axes. Act 1 is usually going to be a stone axe. The next axe that I really look to upgrade to is a wood splitter. This can drop. You can sometimes get these off Merveil or the last. I think they can drop from the last zone in Act 1. I think that's level 13. But typically, you're going to start finding a lot of these as soon as you get in Act 2. Next up, the next thing that I upgrade to is double axe. Double axes are really, really good. As soon as you get to Act 3, you want to check Hargan and see if he's vendoring one of these. Hopefully with like an open 2 red sockets, like at least 3 sockets on it. And then after that, the next thing I upgrade to is a shadow axe. If I get a really, really good double axe, I may not upgrade it. It depends, but otherwise I'm upgrading to shadow axe. After that is a timber axe at 41. And then this is a big one. Once you hit 49, this is at the end of Act 6, the beginning of Act 7, you can start getting Labris. And this is usually going to be your axe that will carry you to endgame. While you're farming Blood Aqueducts, you might get lucky and drop an Ezomite. Other than that, your endgame axe is going to be a Vaal axe. And then this can start dropping in Act 10. This is our endgame axe. If you're wondering why not a Despot, because a Despot is actually a damage loss overall. If you were doing a pure Rage Vortex build, you would want to use Despot, but since we are playing Sunder, our on-hit with Sunder loses about 25% of our damage if we use a Despot instead of a Vaal, which is going to feel a lot worse for clear. So yeah, and then overall the damage is comparable on the Rage Vortex as well. So that's simply because pure Rage Vortex builds are going to scale attack speed even harder than we are, so they want the faster attacks on the base. But Vaal axe is better for us being a Sunder Rage Vortex kind of hybrid build. And 99% of the time while you're clearing maps, you're going to be using Sunder, not Rage Vortex. I saw some people, someone posted my video on Reddit, and there's some people saying like, well, this is just a Rage Vortex build. It's really not. You're playing Sunder 99% of the time. There are like 2 situations where you use Rage Vortex. It's like tanky essence monsters, and then I will throw Rage Vortexes onto Sentinel mobs. If you've played Melee, especially like stuff like Bone Shatter and stuff, you know that Sentinel monsters are like the worst fucking monsters in the world because you hit them and then they don't take any damage, and it's really annoying. Luckily for us, Rage Vortex hard counters Sentinel because it attacks 11 times a second. It's going to get through their absurd block chance anyway and kill them. So it feels very good when you encounter Sentinel monsters. Other than that, I don't really use it. Sunder's, the way Sunder overlaps work in addition, or like in synergy with Impale, the Impaler node, excuse me. The way they work together gives you such insane burst damage while mapping that it is actually insane. Like you deal so much damage when there's monster density that nothing, like everything dies. Blue packs just get wiped off the face of the earth. Rare monsters die as long as they're standing next to other monsters. Like you have basically insane shotgunning. It's technically overlapping, but shotgunning gives people a good idea of like what I'm talking about. As long as there's any amount of monster density, and this is pre-buff, by the way, so we get 20% more damage with this. So you will not have to be spamming Rage Vortex while clearing, and it's just like a crappy Bladestorm Rage Vortex setup. This is very much a Sunder build. Anyway, so that's the basis. So that's what you want to kind of like be looking to upgrade while leveling. And then if you don't know, a very, very, very mandatory thing for leveling melee, if you're not used to leveling melee, you don't know about this, you want to save blacksmith whetstones, and you can buy a blacksmith whetstone for 3 armor scraps if you need. Usually while leveling, I sell my armor scraps for scrolls of wisdom, especially in Act 1. However, if you are getting unlucky and you do not get any blacksmith whetstones, you can save 3 of your armor scraps to buy 1 blacksmith whetstone. And this is very important because you can vendor 1 blacksmith whetstone and a magic, rare, or unique rustic sash along with an axe to be able to get an axe that has percent fizz rolled on it. This is going to carry you early game on your axes, right? If you are in Act 1 or Act 2 and you get a contempt essence or some type of just like a throwaway essence, if you want to throw it on an axe to try to get lucky, you can. I have gotten 2 really insane axes from just essence throwing during my leveling runs. But other than that, your rustic sash, blacksmith whetstone, axe, vendor recipe is mandatory to know for melee leveling. It will absolutely, it is a huge difference while leveling. I cannot stress it enough. If you don't know what it is, utilize it. It is huge for melee leveling. All right. So moving on from that, I think that's all the leveling stuff out of the way. Now, before we get into anything, I want to explain in terms of endgame, I want to explain DPS. So you guys can kind of ignore the little notes I wrote down here at the bottom. There are 2 different rotas or rotations that we can use for this build, and this is going to depend on your rage generation. So you have a ×2 rage vortex rotation and a ×1 rage vortex rotation. The ×2 does 8.2 mil, a little bit over, and the ×1 does a little bit under 6.8 mil. And this is assuming an 800 PDPS axe, Vaal axe that is. And what does this mean? Okay, well, basically, let me see if I can find it. Your Intimidating Cry has effectively a 6-second cooldown, and your Rage Vortex has duration. I'm blind. There it is. 3.3 second duration. Okay. So what does that mean? That means you can fit every rotation. You will pop Intimidating Cry and you will throw out your Rage Vortex, right? A little bit over 3 seconds pass, the Rage Vortex is going to go away. So then you can throw out a non-Intimidating Cry Rage Vortex, all right? So one will get the 50% more damage, more attack damage multiplier from Warbringer, and double damage from Intimidating Cry. And then one won't have that. So these are with that average together because you will have a 50% uptime on your Intimidating Cry with your Rage Vortexes, okay? So the 2 times rotation is just doing that. You Intimidating Cry, you throw out your Rage Vortex, and then at 3 seconds go by, the Rage Vortex expires, you throw out another one. 3 seconds go by, your Rage Vortex expires, Intimidating Cry's back up, you pop Intimidating Cry, you throw the Rage, etc., right? The 1 times Rage Vortex rotation, you will pop Intimidating Cry, you'll throw out your Rage Vortex, 3 seconds go by, you don't renew it, you just wait until Intimidating Cry comes back up. So on that rotation, you're only throwing out when Intimidating Cry is up. Now, why is this important and why would you do this rotation that gives you less damage? Well, this comes down to your rage generation, right? So early on, you are unlikely to have enough rage generation to carry out a 75 rage Vortex, right? So we have 13 rage sacrificed because as soon as we use Intimidating Cry, we sacrifice 10 of our rage, which will put us at 65 rage, right? When we use Rage Vortex, we sacrifice 20% of that, which is 13 rage, okay? So basically, we want to be using our Intimidating Cry and throwing out our Rage Vortex at max rage, okay? And for the, preferably for the Rage Vortex that's going out that doesn't have an Intimidating Cry, you would want 75 because that's going to give you the most damage, but you want at least over 65, right? You want at least over 65 rage to have this 13 rage sacrifice for the consistency of the calculation, right? Because if you're not passing at least that, because again, you want to pass at least 65 because it will match up, because when you pop Intimidating Cry, you sacrifice 10, which puts you at 65. Obviously, the second Rage Vortex you're throwing out, you're not using Intimidating Cry, so you just need to have 65 by the time you use a Rage Vortex. That way, the amount of rage being sacrificed lines up. The reason why is because if you are not sustaining that, then you are going to keep losing more and more rage every single time, which will greatly diminish your DPS until eventually you drop down below 25, and Warbringer actually will top you back up to 75, right? So you will end up, oops, that's the wrong thing. You will end up losing DPS because of that. So that's why it's important. So early on, you may not have enough rage, and you will get enough rage through the glove implicit for gain 1 rage on hit with attacks. So you can have the lowest level of this, but if you get a higher one, it's better because like I said, you need at least 65 rage for these calculations to work out on your second Rage Vortex. That's not sacrificing anything. And then any more you can get is just better. We'll just make these numbers go up, if that makes sense. But this calculation here is assuming that, oops. This calculation here is assuming that your second Rage Vortex without Intimidating Cry has 65 rage. If you go beyond that, these numbers actually go up. So basically, if you pop Intimidating Cry and you throw out your Rage Vortex, if by the time your Rage Vortex expires, you do not have at least 65 rage, you're better off following this rotation instead of throwing out 2. That's basically what I'm getting out here. Hopefully I explained this enough. And then this is also, PoB can't really calculate accurate Rage Vortex DPS. So this is the total DPS of the build, not the DPS of just Rage Vortex by itself. So if you're following this rotation with the 800 DPS axe with the gear I have listed in the PoB, which I will show you, you are at 6.8 mil. And if you're following this rotation, you are at 8.2 mil total. That's total DPS, not Rage Vortex DPS, to be clear. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, I will touch one last time on Impaler tech. You want to click Impaler while you're mapping, and anytime you do endgame bossing, you want to take Impaler out because it will be a big DPS loss. But while mapping, this is what is going to carry your clear. Do not sleep on this and do not ignore this node. Basically, I explained this in the other video, but basically, every time your Sunder will hit all these monsters. So these little diamond shapes are monsters, and these trapezoid looking things. This is 3, 5 sides. These pentagrams, pentagons. A lot of videos in one day. These pentagons are your Sunder waves, right? So this is a simplified diagram, but basically all the monsters here will get hit by Sunder, but 5 monsters in each individual one of these waves will release a shockwave. And each one of these shockwaves, they're all the same size. I don't know why I made the first one so small. They're more like this, right? But each one of these waves, so that's 5 monsters in that wave, and that's 5 monsters in this wave, right? So anytime you shoot this into a pack, you're getting like a bajillion hits on everything, right? Like it's obnoxious, right? Like you can't even see what's going on. There's a bunch of these shockwaves because each individual wave of your Sunder, as it pulses outwards, you know, boom, 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 boom. Each one of those can proc up to 5 shockwaves on every monster while also hitting them with the base Sunder, right? That's why your DPS is so insane while clearing. Now, when you take Impaler, your first hit, your first hit of the Sunder wave will proc max Impales on them, right? And then each one, I'm blind. Each one of these shockwaves will then get a full Impale when it pulses around it, which gives you insane damage while clearing. This is how you're going to have really good clear and be one-tapping packs without Herald of Ash, without War Cries, without any of stuff. It relies on Impaler. The difference between playing this without Impaler and with Impaler is very different. Definitely do not ignore this node and then be like, Fizz, clear feels a little bit lacking. Take Impaler. It's a godsend for clear. Will feel really good, trust me. Just remember when you're bossing, unspec this because it's going to break your DPS if you don't. All right. Now, with that out of the way, we're going to go through gear. So 90% of this gear, I always calculate. You'll notice my EHP and everything here. Molten Shell is active. It is base Molten Shell, right? It is... Oh, that's Vaal Molten Shell, excuse me. The base Molten Shell, right? So these are the differences here. So when Molten Shell is not up, right? And then I never have Flask active. But while mapping, this is going to be likely your EHP pool, right? And then all the node or all the damage calculations you see here are not with Onslaught. They are they're not PoB warriored at all. That's what I'll say. I'm not, using a mapping setup to calculate my boss damage. So, gear. Vaal Axe, it is, like I said, an 800 PDPS axe. When you have the PoB, if you feel like it, like literally just decrease this to whatever the DPS your axe is, and you'll be able to get a more accurate read. Just remember that you will have to actually manually calculate. Oh my gosh. You will have to manually calculate your Rage Vortex DPS because PoB does not do a good job of that. Moving on from there, we have, okay, so like all of this gear, 90% of this gear is just placeholder crap. I just assume like some amount of life and spell suppression. Okay, that's it. So you don't need, I know the tier 1 spell suppress rolls are max rolled. You don't need that at all. I'm 10% over spell suppression cap. So even if you have bottom roll full T1 spell suppressions, you will still be capped on spell suppression. Just before anybody is like, oh, you have full max roll. No. You don't need that. Okay, so our implicits are what are important here. We have 20% increased vulnerability curse effect and 6% of physical damage from hits taken as fire damage from Exarch and Eater respectively. On the chest piece, 99% max life with suppressed spell damage. And then we have 16% of fizz damage taken as fire. This is from the Gravicious craft. Then I'm also running aura effect and determination aura effect on my implicits. On our gloves, again, just a life roll and suppression. That's it. That's all we have on the gloves. Now, in reality, you might want to get some like attack speed here. You want to maybe get some like fizz added to attacks. You could put whatever you really feel like here. There's a bunch of stuff here. You could put +1 AoE and +1 to socketed AoE skills here, and then throw most of your auras in here, and then get like a free level 21 determination, free level 21 what is that banner called? Dread banner, things like that. Throw that in there, and that's what your benchcraft would be. Our implicits here are important. Bottom roll spell suppress and gain 1 rage on hit with attacks. Now for the boots, we're running 2 tones. And again, all of these are dex, strength hybrid bases, armor evasion hybrid bases that are heavy on armor because we care more about armor than evasion. The evasion is just so we can roll spell suppression. So again, a mid-tier life roll with a tier 1 suppression roll, because we need tier 1 suppression roll to cap spell suppression in 3.19. If you are unsure of how to get I-85 plus bases in order to roll tier 1 suppress easily in SSF, check out my last video that I just uploaded that goes over my Atlas tree and how you can use Abyss to easily farm high eye level bases in SSF, or trade if you want. So the bench craft here is the move speed craft with cannot be chilled. This is important. This makes us immune to chill, which on a attack speed build, especially one that relies on attacking fast, having chill immunity is really nice. So you're going to want to get that as soon as you can. That is unveiling boot unveils, not from any particular member. You can get it from any member when they drop boots. So unveil every pair of boots you get. That's how you're going to get this. Our implicits from Influence are Intimidating Cry has 20% increased cooldown recovery rate and increased action speed. That's just, that's move speed and damage. It is what it is, whatever. Now, on the Amulet, I have a mid-tier roll of flat fizz 2 attacks and like tier 2 life, I think, with bench crafted on +1 to minimum endurance charges. Obviously, you can get a way better Amulet than this, but like I said, when I POB this stuff, I try to simulate like day two gear or whatever for the most part. Outside of like build enabling stuff that I really need. This is very easy to get. You should be able to achieve this in a few essence hits. Like it's 2 mods on the item, right? Like I don't inflate my POBs much. So all the numbers you see here on the EHP and the DPS, you can definitely go well above that when you have like endgame min-max gear, right? We anoint Disciple of the Slaughter because this is how we will get frenzy charges while clearing. It will also give us +1 minimum frenzy charge while bossing. Yeah, this is how we go. Because, one, we don't have room for Blood Rage, and you don't really want to run Blood Rage on a Rite of Ruin build, because Rite of Ruin gives you massive degen. So it would be hard to sustain life during that. So that's why we're anointing that. Early game, cheap anoints you can do. You could do like a really cheap spell suppression anoint if you want, like Instincts, Sepia, Azure. You should have that within a few maps. You could also go for like a cheap damage anoint if that's what you want. Kinetic Impacts is pretty cheap. Yeah, just it depends on what you want to do. There's all sorts of stuff you could do for like early cheap anoints, just depending on what you need. Later on, if you decide, you can actually anoint Sovereignty or Charisma for more aura effect and reservation. Just depends on what you want to do. But I think my endgame anoint is going to be Disciple of the Slaughter. Disciple of the Slaughter gives you a ton of damage on your Rage Vortex for bossing, which is where we're going to need it. Moving on from there, we're running a double unset ring setup because Chris Wilson hates us and Melee needs 1,000 sockets in modern day. So, one unset ring is a Warlord item. So this is a Drox Influence unset ring. Don't freak out when you see this. Because this is assuming endgame stuff in this sense. This is because you have a 6-link axe and a 6-link chest piece. Early on, what I'm going to be doing while mapping is basically I'm going to have Rage Vortex on like a 4-link, maybe a 5-link. And then I'm going to be running what I was running on my test character in red maps. I had a 5-link Rage Vortex with my 6th socket being an aura, and then I had 1 unset ring. So that's what I was doing. That's what I'll be doing on Leaguestart as well. So until you get 2 6-links, you don't even need to worry about having a Drox unset ring. But we need the Drox ring because it gives us Vuln on hit. All I have here is a whatever life roll, a very middling life roll, because the most important thing here is just having Vuln on hit. And then obviously on all these pieces of gear, it goes without saying that you're going to want resistance rolls on them. I just don't put manual resistance rolls on gear because that's weird. It just goes without saying, and it's not hard to get, right? Other than that, we benchcraft on -7 to total mana costs. Elrion crafts, very important for the build. For our other unset ring, I only have life here. I benchcraft on +1 to minimum endurance charges, and I have -10 to total mana costs. So you may say, wait, Fizz, that's an unveil. That's unveil strength. That's true, because in 3.19, metamodding is dead. I would metamod this ring, but I can't in 3.19 unless they drastically buff divine drop rates. So what I'm going to be doing, and what most people are probably going to be doing, the meta, at least for SSF, is you're going to be abusing the shit out of Ashling. I'm not going to go into it too much in depth in this video, but basically you want to run Ashling, get your Mastermind up, get Ashling level 3, run your Mastermind, and then hopefully it deletes a mod that you don't care about, and then you get an unveil for mana cost. I actually don't even know in this example. I don't think I can even get an Elryon craft. I just put it in here when I was POBing it. I actually don't know if you can get member specifics when you do Ashling hits. I have no idea. But if it's -7 or -10, it doesn't really matter. You'll be able to sustain the mana costs anyway. It actually doesn't matter, but I just put -10 when I was in here, so I would remember to talk about how to craft it. So if you guys have any questions about this, let me know. Moving on from here, we just have a Stygian Vise. I literally just put tier 1 life on this because all I'm going to use the Stygian for is basically life and resist. Anything else is a bonus. You may be like, dude, that's tier 1 life. You're right, it is. It's very easy to get a Stygian Vise with tier 1 life and some resist rolls on it. It's very easy. From there, I have a Murderous Jewel. It's basically just life and some fizz to attacks. The only mandatory roll here is life, obviously. I didn't put tier 1 life on it because in my experience, getting tier 1 life on Abyss Jewels is actually really difficult. So I just put on a whatever life roll and then some fizz to attacks. But you can fill this in with whatever you need. You can do fizz to attacks. You can do attack speed. You can do resistances to help yourself cap resist. It depends on whatever you need. Finally, our 1 jewel socket that we have with this tree, I have life, melee damage, and the most important role here is damage leached, fizz leeches mana. This is the most important role. If you have nothing else here, you want to use, you want to get fizz leeches mana. And you can work your way up to a jewel like this. This is obviously a 3 mod beneficial item. It shouldn't be very hard to get because these are all pretty common rolls on a Viridian. There's also multiple rolls you can get here. It doesn't need to be melee damage. It could be attack speed. It could be area damage or whatever, right? There's a bunch of different small damage mods you could get to put on this, right? But the most important one is mana. The second most important one is life. The third most important one is any damage mods you can get on this, right? I think going beyond a 3 mod jewel is unrealistic. For people who are wondering, mana leech while leveling or before you get a Viridian jewel, what you're going to want to do is just literally click this node. This is going to give you your life leech early on before you get martial experience, and it's going to give you mana leech early on before you get your Viridian rolled up. If you guys have any questions about that, feel free to let me know. And that concludes the gear section. All of this is very easily achievable. The only thing that will take a little bit of farming is going to be getting a either a Warlord Exalt to do this yourself, or a unset ring that has Warlord influence. Though early on, you can use any ring with Warlord influence, which shouldn't be very hard to get as long as you're farming it. And then, yeah, that's literally it. Everything else here is very easily achievable. I can't imagine anything here would take, well, at least for me, it wouldn't take me more than 2 days to get anything here except the Drox ring. I mean, that's pretty much it. And then 800 PDPS axe. This kind of comes down to just essence farming. You're going to want to, especially with nerfed harvest. We don't know how strong or weak harvest will be. But assuming it is assuming I just can't use harvest, it's just going to be farming a bunch of like shrieking and deafening contempt essences and just hitting it until I get something good. And that's really all it comes down to. So I may, it just depends on RNG. By day 3, I may still be using a 650 DPS axe. It just depends on what Chris Wilson deems worthy, deems me worthy of, right? So this is also how we're getting our endurance charges. So you'll notice we have 2 endurance charges here. So our final config while bossing will be 1 frenzy and 2 endurance charges. While mapping, you'll have 3 frenzies and onslaught. So to explain the checks in the POB, we'll obviously be at 75 rage. We will be fortified. Again, we'll have 2 endurance charges and 1 frenzy charge while bossing. Banner planted. If you feel like micromanaging your banner, you can get a little bit more damage out of it. If you don't want to micromanage your banner, well, then you lose a little bit of damage. It's like 2% or something, 3%. That's due to Bannerman giving you 30% increased damage whenever you have it placed. That 7.7% is not accurate because you also get a bunch of aura effect from this. Moving on, 13 rage, sacrifice from Rage Vortex is assuming you're throwing your Rage Vortexes out at 65 rage. Beyond that, Pride, it is set to maximum effect. Pride with quality is the size of the sun. It is almost an entire screen, so that should be basically at max effect while bossing. We are in Blood Stance. You'll never really want to swap to Sand Stance in this build. If you like Giga over damage, like out damage everything, and you're still killing map bosses really fast, you can swap to Sand Stance for more AoE while clearing. But for 90% of the time, especially early on in the league, you're just going to stay in blood stance all the time. You want the damage. Warcry power is set to 20 because it's set to 20 anytime you're near a unique enemy, but it doesn't really matter because power doesn't really do anything for us in this. This literally doesn't affect anything. Moving on, the boss will be maimed because we have our totems linked to maim support, so we do get damage from that. The boss will be bleeding due to vulnerability, causing us to bleed, which I saw someone say that that wasn't realistic. We attack over 3 times a second, and with vulnerability, we have a 20% chance to bleed anytime we attack, right? And with the base duration of bleeds, there's like a 0% chance that you can't upkeep bleed while bossing, because someone said bloodlust wasn't realistic in a Reddit thread, I believe. So yes, you absolutely will be able to upkeep your bleed on the boss. Close range, I have this checked with melee distance to enemy being 1, simply to get the proper damage from close combat support. And then it doesn't have to be 1. Like, I wonder how high you can go here. Yeah, even if you're 10 yards away, you still get max damage. If you're 15 yards away, you still get it. Yeah, so once you get up to 20 yards, you start losing damage. So there's a lot of leeway here. I just set it to 1 just to get the damage on close combat support and not mess with it, right? Beyond that, Intimidate is checked because it will, increase our damage, obviously, and we get Intimidate via this node, which will intimidate enemies when we attack them. So that is the entire config file. Here you can see there's no fuckery going on. It is set to bosses and stuff, right? Set to pinnacle bosses. So just so everyone knows, there's no POB warrior bullshit going on here. Everything here is completely realistic in realistic scenarios, right? So now, moving on to the passive tree. I already went through a lot of this in the other Sunder video, so if you want more in-depth explanations into mechanics and stuff like that, check that out. I'm just going to link the tree down below. I just wanted to make sure that you guys took Impaler. It's very important. Aside from that, you're using the Fizz Mastery down here on Bastion Breaker to cap your Impale, so make sure you don't ignore that. The Impale Mastery for Dread Banner Mana Reservation is very important to have as well. You do need to pick that up, and that's everything. Some changes you can make to the build. If you want to add more jewel sockets, you can drop Destroyer. It will give you an additional jewel socket here, or you can take those points out if you don't feel like you need damage, and you can grab life here. Other than that, that's kind of everything, I believe. I can't think of anything else. Later on, once you get enough aura effect and you flip your Dread Banner and stuff, you may have enough Impale chance to not have to run this. When you, I can't remember if your glove implicit overrides this. Like the spell suppression glove implicit, if the one, I can't remember if it's Eater or Exarch, but if the one that gives you spell suppression can also roll Impale chance, then with a max quality Dread Banner and the chance to impale on gloves, you could probably drop this mastery, which would save you a passive point to spend elsewhere. Other than that, make sure you pick up Berserking, because max rage gives us a bunch of damage with Rite of Ruin. Hardy is pretty much mandatory. I've played Rite of Ruin without it before, but I was on a Warcry Earthshatter build, so I was healing a shit ton of life all the time from Warcries and had Enduring Cry. So I didn't I just healed a lot more on average, even without needing to hit something for Leech. So that's everything kind of explained here. I don't have the Mana Reservation Mastery taken, obviously, because I got removed from the game, so there's not a whole lot here. Aura effect is kind of whatever, and the increased damage is kind of whatever. None of the masteries there look too good, so don't have any of them. Past that, if you wanted to, late game, you could take regenerate 2% of life while moving and get rid of it. I recommend taking it, but again, you can kind of play with a few points here and move them around based on what you want. If I were fighting Cirrus, I would definitely unspec a point somewhere. Maybe even like drop this off Destroyer and take CB immune just for Cirrus specifically. I don't think you need it all the time. For the Ascendancies, while leveling, you're going to want to rush Crave the Slaughter in first lab, into Rite of Ruin at second lab. Third lab, you take Aspect of Carnage, and then once you do Uber lab, you will grab Warbringer. It's very straightforward. I guess finally I will touch on Entrench. So this stuff is buffed now. These used to give 4%. They now give 5%, the minor nodes. Entrench itself still gives 12%, but the spell suppression mastery also got buffed. It gives an additional 2%. So for the entire wheel, we get an additional 5% spell suppression. So yeah, I path down here. I spend 2 additional passive points versus pathing up here to save an Annoint. That is effectively what you get. And then early game, you also get Mana Leech for going down here. But for the people, I saw Ben's POB for his pure Rage Vortex build, which is a very different build than this. But a lot of people ask me, like, why don't you go Mage Bane and Reflexes? It's because I needed to save my Annoyant, because I don't use Poacher's Mark to sustain Frenzy charges on bosses. So I needed a different avenue to get Frenzy charges on the build. Hope that explains everything there. I went over the gear and all that stuff. Now, for uniques, because I've seen this asked a lot. I don't play softcore, but if I did play trade softcore, I would want a Rislotha's belt, and I would want a Ashes of the Stars ASAP. Now, for my SSF friends, there are 2 uniques that I have on my brain. I want to farm an Ashes on this build. This is because when we get a bunch of quality on an Anomalous Sunder, we could theoretically get near instant, if not instant waves, which will feel really good, obviously. So for me personally, you just set up a boss rush Atlas, just spam Eater for days on end, and eventually you will get an Ashes. I farmed 3 amulets last league without focus farming them, so I'm sure if I focus farm it for a week, I should have one. That's with my play time. Your mileage may vary if you're playing SSF, playing in Trade League, just buy it, forehead. Now, the other big one is Death Rush, right? I don't think this is updated in... Oh, it is. It is updated in PoE. This is very cool. So I guess I'll add this to the build. So Death Rush will give you life on kill, which we don't give a fuck about, but it will give you adrenaline for 3 seconds on kill. And you may say, well, Fizz, wait, but you need unset rings. True. However, adrenaline is fucking crazy, okay? Adrenaline is nuts. So if I get this ring, I will 100% be using it for mapping. Because you'll notice if we check adrenaline, we get a lot of Fizz DR. Like, we are immune to physical damage, basically. Like, you have a lot of Fizz DR with this shit. Now, it also gives 100% increased damage and 25% increased attack and movement speed. You are going to zoom with this. You're going to be tankier and you're going to zoom. So by taking adrenaline, by taking a unset ring and getting rid of it, again, this is only for mapping. You would not do this while bossing. You would get rid of this ring slot and you would use a Death Rush, and then you would literally just turn off. You would literally just turn off either Pulverize or Bloodlust or something, and put one of your auras back in your chest piece or axe, depending on where you have Rage Vortex socketed. So you would just take your Rage Vortex and make it a 5 link instead. Because adrenaline will give you so much damage, because Rage Vortex scales so crazy with attack speed also. Adrenaline will give you so much damage that it's actually a damage gain to drop a support link to be able to run this ring, while also making you tankier and making you map way faster, because you get a shit ton more move speed and attack speed, right? So if you get this ring, absolutely run it for mapping. Just, again, very obviously, make sure you swap back to your real ring for bossing and stuff. So yeah, those are the only 2 uniques I plan on getting in the build. Again, if you're playing softcore, make sure you grab a Rislotha's or something, or whatever belt you feel like, whatever OP belt you want, Mage Blood or Headhunter, you know, whatever floats your boat, man. The world is your oyster in software trade. So yeah, that's everything. I hope I explained this enough. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to let me know. I will make a small leveling tree, and I'll put in like the Act 1 links in the notes section, so check that out. But yeah, that's my League starter. Be sure to check this channel. Well, I'm going to stream for over 24 hours, but be sure to check this channel after Leaguestart for my day 1 update, and to see what potential changes I may have made and how my progression with the build is going. Very excited for tomorrow. I think a lot of people are really going to like this build. I don't want to hype it up too much, but my practice runs on it and the test runs to see if it feel good were actually very surprising, even without the buffs. So it should be really, really fun to play. Should be quite strong. And I'm really excited to finally be able to play, you know, not super slow wave Sunder. Anyway, I think I'm going to end the video here. If you liked the video, if you appreciated this, please do support me. You can just, you know, sub, ring the notification bell. Like, comment, all that stuff helps the algorithm. If you want to find me in other spaces, streaming daily on Twitch, check out my Discord. I'm very active in there. I help people all the time. And finally, Twitter as well. Follow me on Twitter. I will go over one last note here. I have a few alternate quality gems here. I have Anomalous Brutality for 10% additional chance to cause bleeding. I have Anomalous Cast when damage taken. I have Anomalous Ancestral Protector. Phantasmal Leap Slam, Divergent Frostblink. All of these are basically quality life builds that are not mandatory to run the build at all. I just threw them in so people who are following this, because we do want Anomalous Sunder. It's not mandatory to have it, but I am absolutely going to farm it. So people who are following along, if you happen to see any of these alternate quality gems in Heist, make sure you grab them. That's why they're in the POB. It's not mandatory, but just if you see any of these other gems, alternate quality, while you're farming your Anomalous Sunder, or if you're in Trade League and you want to pick them up, definitely do so, because they do help the build in some form or another. That's why they're in there. Sorry, one last tidbit. Anywho, I'm going to end the video here. I still have more videos to make. I hope you guys have a good league start. If you're playing this build, be sure to let me know how it works out for you. Yeah, hope everybody has fun with the build, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good 3.19, everybody. Peace.